morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We're also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You get more information, find out about previous shows and future shows at our website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week, we focus on news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Jason de Los Santos. Am I pronouncing it correct? Help
You
me on
said it perfectly. I would have thought
that.
you were a native Spanish speaker by that pronunciation.
Okay. Who is founder and owner of the Pixielated Stories Digital Marketing. And what you can do, Jason, feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. Okay, that is Jason. As you mentioned, Jason is a digital marketing strategist and founder of Pixielated Stories Digital Marketing. He helps small businesses attract local customers and grow using his proprietary local marketing machine system. I'm anxious to hear more about that. He's a dedicated father of two and a husband to a fellow entrepreneur. Jason is passionate about mental frameworks, fitness, and empowering others to take ownership of their lives. Based in Nashville, he serves as a long-term bilingual partner to his clients, leveraging AI and automation to cut marketing costs. And Jason, the question I always ask the first time I meet somebody on the air is, as a kid, you grew up where?
Um, Between New York and Dominican Republic.
Okay. And so as a kid growing up in New York and Dominican Republic, did you always know you wanted to be a marketing entrepreneur?
That was not in my mind. Absolutely not.
And where do you want to be as a kid?
So let's see. For a period of time, I wanted to be a scientist, and the only reason that I wanted to be a scientist was because I knew that Batman was a scientist. At least I thought so. And then I wanted to be in the military, and just because I used to play with GI Joe. Do you remember those?
Oh,
Those
sure.
little, yeah. Um, and uh, and then from there, then it just transitioned to a bunch of different things. But none of the things that I dreamt about being as a kid, I ended up as an adult.
So as an adult, then you got into marketing eventually. How did you get
Mhm.
into marketing?
Well, so the short story is that I've been, let's just say, in business for about 20 years through different businesses. I got into it after I had been laid off. A friend of mine owned a medical equipment company, and we chatted. He brought me onto his company, and so we started working together. And so it was a very small company. It was only, I think, four of us in the company. And so naturally, as you know, in a small company, you do all the things. And I started working in operations and customer service, like through finance and just like learning all these things. And over the years, I seem to just constantly be pulled into the creative side of the business, into marketing. Just because I feel like I've always been a creative person. Marketing has a lot of that. And just not just the strategy and the creative aspect, but just the visual aesthetics and psychology. I think marketing is one of those. It's very interesting in that you have to understand just people, and so all those things drew me to it. And so in the past year, I got out of those partnerships and considering what to do. I chose marketing, and we can talk about that as much as you want, but that was just a thing that I just felt it felt right to go into the marketing industry and help others with that, with things that I struggled with when I had my businesses with those partners.
But it's kind of cool is what you were saying about marketing is that in another life, I was a marketing professor and I was a consultant
Mm.
in marketing. I always thought it was a great field. Some people would look at me, how can you enjoy this? I thought it was just so much fun. But the point being, and I think you're kind of going to get in that direction, is that marketing encompasses everything we do. Whatever we're doing in some aspect of marketing. And I know, just as an aside, to talk about you, you're also doing, aside from your business, you're also active in the Chamber of Commerce as well,
Mhm.
right? And what do
Yes.
you do with the chamber?
A couple things. So one is that or I attend a weekly meeting, and they call it a PNG, and so it stands for Professional Networking Group. And we meet once a week. It's usually the same people, and we talk about different things. So typically you go around the room, everyone states their name and what they do, and most everybody will already know each other, but just sometimes it's just one of those marketing frameworks is that you have to repeat the same message over and over again until somebody understands finally, like, oh, that's what they do. So we do that, and then the chamber also supports new businesses or grand openings, and so I attend some of those events, and it's just a different way to participate into the community. I've I forget the last time, but I've had a couple of grand openings, and the feeling, the dread that nobody's going to show up to your grand opening, to your business, to see your new baby is terrible. And so sometimes just being able to show up to a new business when they're opening, it's pretty. It doesn't take that much time for me, but it could mean something to that business owner to at least make them feel like, okay, well, I feel a little, at least a little bit supported.
And talk about what you just mentioned in terms of how important is it for individuals to be involved in networking and meeting other people and getting out and involved in the community?
Well, I when I first moved to Asheville, I joined the Asheville Chamber, and I went to, it might have been 2 or 3 meetings. I was very new to networking. I didn't really understand it. I was very green in that space. And after those 3 meetings, I said, this is dumb. I'm not getting anything from it. I didn't get a sale. Nobody bought anything from me. Obviously not the right mindset. And this sort of latest iteration, I've been attending the chamber since I believe it was February. And I knew at this point that you have to build relationships. And so relationships is not just seeing somebody once, like, oh, hey, Blaine, nice to meet you, buy my stuff, right? You're not going to feel any kind of connection, probably feel like you're being sold to, and nobody likes that. So it's just one of those things. It's just being a human with another human being, right? Like you want to get to know each other, learn about them, they can learn about you. And at some point, whenever the time is right, there's this sort of period of serendipity. And at some point, if like all the stars align, if they need you or they can refer you to somebody and they trust you, well, then at that point, then they might provide a referral or use your services. But yeah, that was a pretty big transformation for me, and a hard lesson. Unfortunately, I didn't ask, and nobody told me about that when I first joined the chamber many years ago.
Well, you raised such a good point, Jason, and I would tell my students, people I work with as well, the idea is when you join the chamber is to not meet 500 people or 100 people or 50 people at one time, and it used to be when you used to have something such called business cards, and I still like business cards, by the way.
Yeah.
But people would go and think the goal was to meet everybody in a meeting, and you point out, and I think very clearly, that's not necessarily the best thing in the world. You don't have to meet everybody, but you have to meet 1 or 2 people and develop the relationship with that 1 or 2 those 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if I can talk about that a little bit, because
Please, yeah.
I feel like this was something that was very much of value to me when I understood this. But exactly like you're saying, when I go to these events, if I can go away having made at least one good connection, like it's a great evening. Even if it's not a business transaction, but just getting to know somebody. So I think, I don't know, just life being what it is, if you can meet somebody that's interesting, like that's just amazing. And you never know what can come of it, right? You might be able to help them in the future. And I try not to think about it in the sense of like, what can I get out of it? Because you can feel that. Like another person can just detect like, oh, this person is just trying to get something from me. And so I just try to be a good guest in whatever that networking event is, try and be helpful. If there's somebody that's walking around sort of awkwardly, if I can help them just maybe feel more at ease. So as a former recovering introvert, I know that's not a great feeling to be walking around with a drink in your hand or looking at your phone, not sure what to say and where to go next. But yeah, there is something to the quality of the connection that you can make as opposed to I gotta meet 8,000 people.
Yeah.
And so when I started this last transition with my getting into this new marketing company, there were in Asheville, there are so many options for events. I mean, that could be your full-time job, just attending networking events. And so I thought, okay, well, what if I just attend 1 or maybe 2 groups where I can build relationships over time? And so that was my goal for at least a year. I'm going to go to these 2 sort of like general groups and meet people and just see how helpful I can be. Just add value, and then we'll just kind of see what happens. Just like let serendipity lie. show people who you are, be helpful, and then go from there. So that was sort of my aim with this whole thing. So if anybody's listening, just hoping that that's helpful, that there's a time element that you have to spend in meeting people and connecting and offering some sort of help, to whatever your capacity is, and not just going because you want them to buy your junk.
And I love what you said because it reminds me of one of my favorite guys, maybe before your time, but you've heard the name Zig Ziglar, or you know that
Yeah,
name?
yeah.
But he said, word for word, what you just said. He said, you can get anything you want in life so long as you help enough other people get what they want. And
Mm,
so your point is so spot on that when people go to an event, as opposed to what they can get, see if they can help one other person. I love what you said, one person. And I don't know about you, but I try to follow up with an article or an invitation or
mhm.
something that they're interested in. And
Yeah,
it's just really, it's kind of a fun thing to do. It feels good. Let's
it does.
segue from there then into now your business. And I love the
Mhm.
name of the business when I saw it. It's Pixielated uh, Stories, um, Digital Marketing. And
Mhm.
explain first of all that name. Where did you come up with that name?
Yeah, so I've just always been a big fan of stories, and just as humans, we're naturally attracted to stories, right? Like that's how we learn to communicate. And I feel like every business owner has a story to tell. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing to pull out, especially when it's your own business and you're trying to put it out there. The ego gets in the way a lot, but we all do have a story to tell. And just in this day and age, everything is on screens, zeros and ones, and everything is pixelated. And so that just seemed like a natural connection. Just telling stories through a digital means, like we're doing right now. We're sharing stories through this digital means, and otherwise, who knows if we would ever have been able to connect physically, right? Just because of just limitations. But the fact that we can do this, we're across town from each other, but it's so much simpler not having to go across traffic, and like, we're able to have this little conversation.
And so I love what you said about everybody having stories. And so in terms of if I asked you to tell the story of you and I are meeting on via Zoom here, it could be a chamber meeting, could be somewhere else.
Mhm.
And so when I ask people to, the infamous elevator pitch, to
Mhm.
tell your story, but I'll ask put you on the spot if I can. So pixelated digital marketing, pixelated stories, digital marketing. What
Mhm.
are you guys all about?
So we help local business owners, specifically business owners who provide a professional service. So think accounting. I have a customer who provides shuttle service, and so that kind of element with improving their reputation, improving their readiness, being able to receive business, and just improving their reach and visibility in their local community for what they have to offer.
Okay. And I guess to get the story out, even though it's basic to you and me, I guess for some people it's kind of hard to get that story out or to tell what the story is.
Mhm.
And that's what you do. I guess you work with them to develop the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try not to sell it that way when I'm talking to someone that might be interested, because sometimes that seems a little bit scary. So I in a way try to sell the sizzle to the person, and then once we start getting into an engagement, then we start doing that hard work of what are you good at, like what do you offer, and why are you different than other people. Those are not questions that a lot of business owners are, most of the people that I interact with at least, that are comfortable stating, and they know they need that story or that angle or that explanation, and so I'm happy to be the person that can help guide them to extract that and put it out there. And so when my customers see it on their website, they're like, "Oh my God, like you were reading my mind." And like, not really, but it does feel good when they can see in words what they've been either doing or just thinking about and contemplating, like, "Oh, I wish I could say this in the right way." And it's very fulfilling to see somebody feel like they've been heard, and that this entity, let's say this website, shows what they do in fact do for their customers.
And you hit kind of one of the key points, I think, Jason, when you talked about the differentiation, and I'll say to people that how are you different or what makes you different? And if they can't answer it, they need to work with you, I guess, because that's so crucial because if you like everybody else, then why should they use you? as
Mhm.
opposed to somebody else. And so it's such a basic thing maybe to me or to you, but I guess for a lot of people, that's a hard thing to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's understandable, I think, because it's almost like this identity crisis. Because if somebody asks us like, "Hey, go on this stage and stand there by yourself so that we can all stare at you," like, that's a little bit daunting. And so that's in a way what sometimes it feels like when somebody says like, "Oh, well, like, how are you different?" And not all of us are built that way, and just like, "Hey, look at me, like I'm different this way." So it's kind of strange, even though that is what we're trying to do. That's why it's not why we get in business, but it's one of the most helpful things. So I try, when I ask those questions, I try not to do it in a way that's like, hey, let's put you on the spot. It's just more like, oh, let's just kind of start on this low level, and eventually we'll work up to what sets you apart.
And you use something I saw it in material you sent me, but I'll ask you to explain it. Use something
Mhm.
called the what's it, R6 framework, right? And it's
Mhm.
kind of a interesting, uh, I love the name R6 framework, but what
Yeah.
exactly is the R6 framework?
Yeah, so curious to hear your thoughts because I mean this is your field. You've been a marketer for a while. So essentially, in what I so the first time that I went networking, so kind of tying a couple things together. When I started this marketing company, I didn't know exactly the direction, but I knew that I wanted to do marketing. So first time I went to an event and shook hands, and somebody said their name, what they did, and they asked me like, "Oh, hey, Jason, nice to meet you. What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I do marketing." And their face just contorted. They didn't really know what was going on. They're like, I don't know what that means.
I'm
And they
seeing
just
it.
turned
Yeah,
around and walked away.
right. That's not
Um,
a, it's, I digress just a second. It's like
yeah, yeah.
I'll sometimes do a thing. I'll say to somebody, uh, what do you do? And I'll say, hey, I sell life insurance, and inevitably somebody will say, I have to get a drink or, go away, so that you're in marketing is not the real exciting thing when you tell somebody for the first time. I think you're spot on. So what happens
Yeah.
after? How do you evolve from there?
Yeah, so then it was just a matter of iteration. It's just sort of putting stuff out there and understanding or seeing what are people resonating with. Of course, what leads to a customer. Just doing my own research, just understanding the things that have worked for me and for some of my customers. And so I just wanted to put something together that was easy to understand and a nice framework that we can follow, and just be able to explain to someone like, hey, here's the general framework of what we do in business to help you. And that's where I just kind of put these things together. And essentially, um, it's just imagine a pyramid, right? Just with the longer end sort of at the bottom and the peak at the top. And the first level is reliability. Which, funny enough, doesn't have anything to do with marketing, because if a business is just a crappy business, well, then marketing is not going to help it. And so that's just important, because I want to set the right expectation with a customer. Because sometimes people, you may have found this, that somebody is very desperate and they think that marketing or sales or whatever the thing is going to save the day. But if the business is not in good standing, or they just don't have a good product or a good service, well, then they're just wasting that money, and they might as well just use that for something else. There are some other levels on top of that, but essentially, it's just thinking that we take a look at where the business is and assess, okay, well, you're here, that's great. So then maybe we can go into this and work on this next level. But what we don't want to do is what a lot of customers consider is, well, I should do advertising, but then they have a bucket full of holes that if they pour a bunch of money, they get a bunch of customers, but they don't have systems, they don't have good customer service or ability to be connected with. Well, then those new prospects are just going to go right out the door, because that person doesn't have a good entity or a good set of systems to capture those people and have them continue to come back.
And what's even worse is what you kind of just said. I see also people just throw money into advertising and just
Mm.
having no idea what's going for and the results they get, but they think that they have to spend money on advertising. Then they run out of money for advertising, and then they're in worse shape. And so I
Mhm.
guess that's where you come on into play. You help them kind of see what they're spending the money on. So you mentioned the R6. What are there, 6 R's to this?
Yeah, so that first one is reliability. So that's what
Right.
I alluded to, that the business just has to be a good product, or have a good service. The second one from the bottom is reputation. So essentially, that's just what it sounds like, that you have your business, it's exposed to the public, and you have a certain reputation. It could be positive, could be not so positive, and that could be your fault or not. But regardless, you do have a reputation, and so we want to make sure that we elevate that as much as possible, so that people associate, what you do with the problem that they need solved. What were
Let me
you?
just
Sorry,
ask you, just ask you about reputation. So how do you find out your reputation?
Sure. So there are a few different ways. So it's the way that I consider it is a sort of a visual way. So for example, most of the businesses that I work with, they have a Google profile, what used to be called Google My Business.
Right, right.
And you can, of course, you can see their sort of like their little digital building. You see, like for example, Blaine's World Kitchen Store, for example. And you can see the type of information on that Google profile, photos, reviews, which are essentially money in the bank if there are good reviews from customers, because that's other people that are speaking about you as opposed to you touting how great you are. And just taking a look, does this look like a professional place? Do they respond to reviews positively? I read, I'm sort of a dork about these things. I was reading some reviews of a company recently, and they're not in this area, and forget the type of store, but there was a customer that said, this is a terrible store, don't ever come here, they're going to rip you off, and just kept going on. And the owner was essentially insulting that reviewer and just saying, bunch of curse words, and like, oh, you're that guy that did blah blah blah, and just kept going back and forth. And so if other people see that, that's not going to make them think like, oh, well, they treat everybody just terribly, like I'm just going to choose, if I have an option, I'm probably just going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's great. So that's a second R, I think.
Yes, yeah. So
You're on
that's
a roll.
reputation.
Right.
And then the next one is readiness. So that's part of that leaky bucket, because if you have a good business, your reputation is increasing because people see you and they say like, oh yeah, like I want to go to that store or that business, and you want to make sure that you are ready to receive that business. So meaning, can people reach you easily? And these days, typically it's having a website. I like social media to an extent, but I believe in owning your assets better, because with social media, for example, back in the day, if you posted something, it was something like 80+% of your followers or your friends would see it. Nowadays, I think it's less than 3%, if that see it. So I think a website is one of the best things that you can have. And then when they're on your website, can they either call you or contact you or message you or DM you or whatever it is that you want them to do and that the customer prefers? You want to be able to be ready to accept business. So that's the next one. Okay, should I keep going?
Yeah, please. It's great. But
Sure.
by the way, just on that, I do a thing. You're probably familiar with it. It's called the platinum rule. Are you familiar with the platinum rule?
The platinum? No, tell me,
Right.
please.
Okay, I'll send you information on it. But the point is, it's
Okay.
word for word what you just said also. And the platinum rule says you don't treat each other according to the golden rule. Like, do you believe in the golden rule?
Yeah.
I don't. Because
No? Okay.
what does the golden rule say?
Treat others
Right.
as you would want to be
Yeah.
treated.
Why should I treat you, excuse me, yeah, treat others the way I want to be treated? I'd rather treat you the way you want to be treated. So the platinum
Interesting.
rule, it's an interesting spin, but sort of you were alluding to it, in terms of how people get treated, treat them the way they want to be treated, so it's just kind of a spin on what you said. Well, I'm sorry, I cut you off. It's
Yeah,
just
no, thank you. I always looking to learn, so
yeah.
please keep
Well, anyway,
keep
I'm
interjecting.
wearing my teacher hat, even though I'm retired. But
Yeah, no, I love it.
so I cut you off on what was that R? We were talking
Oh,
on the
so that was let's see, we were on readiness. So
right.
that's at the
Yeah.
middle of the triangle. And then from there we keep scaling. So the next thing would be reselling. And so if you have a good reputation, you're starting to get a good flow of clients or customers, then we want to get into reselling, because Although sometimes it's challenging, a repeat customer is less expensive to acquire than a new customer. And so it's just depending on the business, it could be email marketing back to those customers. It could be SMS messages, which are great if your business allows that, because people still read what is it? I think it's like 91% of their text messages. So much more, much higher, at least read rate than email, or whatever the other means is. But just we want to try to get those customers back through incentives, loyalty. For example, I have a company I still have is a CBD and a cannabis company. And as much as I would love to text people, by law, I can't. So that's one channel that is out of possibilities for me, but I can still email them. And, we just send them different messages about what's in store, what's new, how they can benefit by purchasing from us.
Talk about, if you would, companies who have customers, and I find this hard to believe, they never get back in touch with them. In other words, I've done business, and you would think they'd want to be in touch with me every so often. And I see it too often, and you probably do too. For example, a guy did tree work for us several years ago, and I couldn't take up his name and number. I had no idea who he was. And I gave it business to somebody else because he never got back in touch with me. How important is that to keep in touch with your customers?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many times I've contacted a company
Right.
about whatever the thing is, and they called me back, and just life got in the way. I just couldn't take the call or couldn't get a hold of them, and was just wishing that they would get back to me
Right.
so that I can continue to do business with them. And that's just the way that I think about it. Is like, could life have happened to that prospect, and should we still reach back out to them? And most of the time, it's yes. And right now, it doesn't cost that much to reach back out to someone, especially with automation. Automation is so cheap. It's one of the best things ever that you can create, for example, an email automation and just create this sequence of events or messages that person can receive. And depending on your business, the type of product, how much you're selling the thing for, you can send 2, 3 emails or all the way up to like 100 over a long period of time. And those are assets that continue to work for you. And at some point, that should even out, because several of those people eventually would come back and purchase from you because they see the follow through, the follow up, and that you're diligent in wanting their business, as long as you're providing value, of course.
The only time I find that slightly annoying is when it comes to political marketing,
Sure.
Because once you make the mistake of make a donation one time, you're going to hear from them the rest of your life,
They're going to show up at your house.
right. I'm talking like incessantly, and
Yeah.
and they then give it to every other candidate in the party or something, so
Right.
that's the only time I don't love it, but I guess it's part of
Yeah.
the natural way of things happening. So
Yeah, sure. And I think the one thing also is that, and I've had this prevent me in the past, is that, well, I don't want to upset people. Like, I don't want to annoy people. And which is a valid reason, right? Like, you're in business to be helpful, not to pester someone. But unfortunately, the only way that you're going to find out is by doing it. And so you just have to put it out there, test it, and see, do people respond to you? Do they buy, or do they say like, no, I really don't want this? And then you can iterate from there. But if you don't take action, like if you never get to the starting line, well, then you'll never know. And that's 100% failure rate, as opposed to trying it, see, can you really pester people? Well, then you have some success rate as opposed to zero.
well, you sound like me because that's so on target. The alternative, they say, well, what if I annoy somebody? Well, the alternative is don't annoy, don't do anything. Don't do any
Yeah,
marketing, don't work with
right.
your company, and just stay there and wait for them to come to you. But I guess the other point, and I'd like you to talk about this as well, is so you don't get to the point where you annoy people. You should also give them an option to ask you to leave you alone, or say you
Hmm.
don't want to be on their mailing list, or how
Right.
important is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's important, but it's also depending on which channel you're using.
Right.
It could be a legal mandate. So, for example,
Good
with text
point.
messages, you have to include some sort of a um, reply with stop to opt out or something like that. Oh, I'm doing hearts for some reason. I didn't even know that was turned off.
That's a cool. I didn't say that. Very nice. So that's
Um,
But that's
Yeah.
interesting. So you have to give them the option to get out, right, if they want, and then you have to
Right.
honor it, of course, as well.
Yes. Which is
So,
interesting because like you're saying, you have to honor it, but there's so many people that don't,
right.
and they still benefit, right? So that's a bit of a more advanced technique because you can use like different, for example, if it's email, you receive an email and you say, hey, you know what, I really don't want this. I'm gonna unsubscribe. And so then you don't hear from them for a while. And then you hear from them later, and because they use a different server so that they don't get banned by email servers. And so, again, a little bit more advanced, it is possible, but you just have to really understand like what's the point of annoyance and getting banned forever from servers, as opposed to like, okay, well, we can still get business once people sort of like calm down and maybe we can revisit them in the future.
Well, what you're saying about revisiting ties full circle into what I mentioned before, that platinum rule. Because one of the first things I always ask Jason is such a simple question: how do you want me to contact you? You know,
Hmm.
and whatever they answer, that's how I contact them. You know,
Yeah.
so some people say email is best. Well, not for everybody. Phone calls, whatever. So you just try to give the customers, I guess, what they want. You know, and then maximize that. So go back to, so they go through this. I think we hit all the 6 R's, did we?
I think the last two were to remarket,
Okay,
which very very quickly it's essentially you have a certain number of people that come into your world. Let's say they opt in on the website for your email, and but they don't buy because like what is it, 80+% of people don't buy in the first purchase, but they might still want to hear from you. So just sending them, let's say, regular emails or messages or just some form of communication, because at some point they might need your services. And then at the very top, at the pinnacle of the pyramid, then it's reach, which essentially is just advertising. So like once you have like your bucket pretty much intact, it's never perfect, of course, but then at that point, then you said like, okay, well, my systems are in good order. I have some marketing channels that people come through, but I want to expand my reach and just get more people, more customers, more prospects. Well, then we can do advertising, and then there are a whole bunch of different channels for that: Google Ads, Meta Ads, TikTok, Snap, digital or mailers, direct mailers, and a gazillion other ways to advertise.
what I love what you're talking about is the fact that it doesn't have to be real complex. It's like I love that R6 framework. Here are just 6 things you have to think about, and
Mhm.
yeah, if you're thinking about them, it'll help you go in the other directions as well. I guess that's where your company comes then back into play. So if I work with you, you review this framework with me, and then what happens? Become a customer, you then take them through the next steps of what has to happen.
Yeah, that's probably the simple way to say it. But we go through, for most of the customers that I work with, it's setting up a website with the proper information, putting it out to the world. We work on getting a Google profile, or if they already have one, make sure that we optimize it, just putting some nice pictures on there, a great description. By the way, if anyone has a Google profile, what a lot of folks do is that they fill out a couple of things. They put their company name and just like their hours or something like that. But just think of it as free marketing or free advertising, and you should fill out every single field that you have available, because the more information you have, the more messages it sends to Google that you are, I guess, not more reputable, but just that you're more specific about what you offer, and so then your chances of being shown to more people is greater. So fill out every single field that you
Let me
have
ask
with
you that
Google.
for somebody who's listening, if they're not familiar with it, how does one go about even getting the Google profile or finding out how to get it?
Yeah, it's very easy for me, right? Just but you essentially you just go on Google and you search Google profile or Google business profile, and it's a very simple page. It says start your profile now, giant blue button. You just click there, it'll walk you through. It's very simple, and you go through a verification process. So interestingly enough, this week I was working on 2 customers. And so for one customer, it was very simple, just what's the name of the company and the address and all that. And we verified the business was verified in about 2 seconds. And the other business, it's a transportation business. Well, then they have to submit a video of the vehicle and the property and the credentials of the business owner and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you never know what the verification will entail. It just depends on the type of business and Google's, I guess, interpretation of how much validation or security is needed before that business is put out to the world.
Again, that's an advantage, I guess, working through you in that you can help the business do this, or you could go through it step by step.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are, I mean, they can go through me, sure, but these are things that you can do on your own, really. So it's just going through Google and just thinking, like maybe at a higher level, just thinking, I want to get a free listing on Google profile, just looking it up and just following the instructions. And in hopefully about 10 to 15 minutes, you would have that profile where you have a greater chance of being shown to the world. So that's sort of at a high level what you're trying to do.
And I think I'm hearing you give kind of another excellent recommendation. That is, as you're doing that, it's probably a good idea for you to look at some other Google profiles as well
Yeah,
to see kind of what
absolutely.
gets your attention or what makes them
Mhm.
different than others, and kind of emulate that if you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked with some folks that some customers that think, well, I don't want to copy them. And sure, you don't want to be exactly like the other person, but sometimes it is very nice to just walk the paved path and not have to reinvent the wheel. So sometimes it's good to see, for example, what I did with these last customers is to take a look at their competition on Google specifically, and taking a look at the business category that those businesses are in, what kinds of keywords they're using, how is it presented, and then we don't necessarily have to copy them, but we can at least decide, okay, well, is the way that they're presenting themselves a way that we want to present ourselves, and then just use our own language, or do we want to go in a completely different way? But it's never a bad option to at least consider know and consider what your competition is doing, because then you can make better decisions as opposed to just sort of winging it, which is not always a great idea.
It's funny you said that because sometimes I'll tell folks to do exactly what you said, but then also look at a completely different field or a different category, so
Yeah.
that if you're a doctor and then you look at what a plumber does, and say, well, why would you do that? Well, because every doctor looks the same, but if you could be the
Mhm.
one doctor that looks different, sometimes that makes you stand out a little bit. It's just kind of
That's a great idea.
a
Yeah,
fun
you
thing
know, I
to
haven't
do.
considered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, who was it? I think I don't know. Did you ever hear of Jay Abraham?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and he always had this like very flowery language, but I know he would always call that what is it, like looking at orthogonal industries, and just sort of like not exactly
Right.
adjacent, but just sort of like on the next nexus. Just because, like you're saying, a doctor, like all doctors might look the
Right.
same, but is there something you can pull from an accountant or a medical spa or a plumber or something like that? Like you never know unless you consider it or look.
Well, thank you for sharing that because that's probably where I stole it from. Or what I say, Jason, you don't steal, you beg, borrow, modify, adapt from other people. So
Yeah.
I'm sure I probably got that from Abraham. Thanks for reminding that. If folks want to get in touch with you, Jason, what's the best bet?
Probably on our website. So it's pixelatedstories.net. And it has my contact information, information about just what we offer. That would probably be the best place to find me.
And so the best bet in terms of working with you, then find you on the website and then
Mhm.
do what? Make an appointment or send you an email or where do you go from there?
Sure. So on the website, there's a form to either contact me directly, or there's also an option to schedule a conversation. Because I don't expect that anybody's just going to sign up with me. I always like to, so I work on long-term relationships. This is something that I don't need to make money yesterday. So like I have some time. I want to make sure to be able to work with people that I can connect with well, and that I feel like I can provide good value. So there's a form, or sorry, a calendar they can schedule, and we can have a conversation and just see if they like what I have to say, if we can connect well, and then we can, they can decide if they'd like to work with me, or they can just take some suggestions or insights possibly, and they can run with it, or possibly go somewhere else. So there's no pressure, because it's one thing I'll just say real quickly, because I'm just really passionate about this, is that when I had these other businesses, I worked with different marketers, and there was always this very strong inherent bias in that the narrow path that they offered or that they did, and oh, I do SEO or I do Google ads, like that was the only thing that mattered, and that they portrayed to the customer, or like sometimes to me at least, back then. And I told myself that I would never do that. and that I would offer what I offer, and to try to find the people that are best suited for that, like best customers that are best suited for that. But if there's ever someone that I think doesn't either need me, just in my opinion, or maybe they need some help elsewhere, then I'd be the first person to say, you know what, like maybe this is not the right path for you right now. Like maybe you should consider something else, because I never want to take somebody's money, hard-earned money, for something that they could probably spend it on something else.
No, what you just said there, because it kind of full circle to what we started talking about, is in terms of networking, the same kind of thing, that you're interested in meeting with people if you can help them. But if you can't help them, that's okay too. Maybe somebody else who can help them, and
Hmm.
they'll do the same thing with you. Um,
Absolutely.
wow, I have to thank you, because I'm listening to this. I said, wow, this guy, what I like about him is that obviously you know yourself, but also you make it so people can understand it. So it's not,
Mhm.
if excited from the very end, just at the end, you didn't mention SRO at all. You didn't mention, other
Mhm.
stuff, because it's all about the relationship and getting to know the
Yep.
people, I guess, and how you can help them. And then you'll go from there. So
Yep.
I really enjoyed that. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for being my guest on this edition of Blaine's World webcast. Also, I thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and hopefully, Jason, we'll get to see each other sometime in person in the not too distant future.
Absolutely, Blaine. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.